welcome. My name is Ebony, and today I am accompanied by a lovely singing chorus of birds outside of my window to catch up with you, to go over everything I've read so far this year. I will be covering the books in chronological order by date in which I read them. So I'm going to start off with the first book that I finished this year, and that was Enter Ghost by Isabella Hammad. This is about a woman who is returning to the West Bank after many years to star in a production of Hamlet as Gertrude. Our main character, I believe her name is Sonia. Yes, Sonia is returning to Haifa to star in this production of Hamlet. She is in her 30s, divorced, also a very accomplished actress, and she is kind of roped into this production of Hamlet by her sister, and there's this really interesting conversation happening about the ghosts that haunt us and what it means to perform and be an artist under the confines of occupation. It kind of begs the question of what lengths does a people go through in order to express themselves and to be artists. And I found that so moving and so powerful. I also really thought that there were things happening in terms of form that were very interesting, like certain parts of this read as an actual play, and then it moved through prose as well. But this was such a great book. I would highly recommend this, especially if you have been trying to get into more literature from Palestinian authors. I think this is a great place to start. The next book that I finished this year was Rereads by Jesmyn Ward. I listened to this on audio, and this book is a memoir centering the men that Jesmyn Ward lost in her life. There were 5 men in total. 4 of them were either close friends, cousins, and then one of them was her brother. This is set in rural Mississippi. It talks all about kind of the effects of being in a very poverty-run state, of being Black in that state, and kind of the systemic and overt racism that exists, and how that either overtly kind of leads to the death of people living there or subtly leads to that death. I found this memoir to be so engaging even on audio. However, I do wish that it was narrated by Jesmyn Ward herself. There was a different narrator. I just find that I engage more with works when they are narrated by the author on audio. But otherwise, it was just kind of all leading up to this one moment and this one instance in which Jesmyn Ward's brother was tragically killed in an accident, and how that affected her life and continues to affect her life. All right, the next book I finished this year is Martyr by Kaveh, Akbar. I have been wanting to read this book forever, and I finally finished it this year. This centers an Iranian American poet who is writing a novel and becomes obsessed with this idea of martyrdom because his mother tragically passes away in an airplane strike. So she was on a plane, and the United States government sent a missile towards this pedestrian or like charter plane that ended up killing all of the passengers on board. So the narrator, our main character, Cyrus, has kind of always been obsessed with this idea of those who have died for a cause, whether it be they were intentionally putting themselves in the front lines or on the front lines, or those who kind of just get caught up in the crosshairs of like greater conflicts. And this leads our narrator to become fascinated with an artist in residence at the Brooklyn Museum who is allowing people to ask her questions about dying, as she has been diagnosed with a terminal form of cancer and her prognosis is not looking great. So many interesting conversations in terms of like immigration, identity, place, martyrdom, and just the role that, once again, I believe art has in all of these things. So there's a bit of a theme happening, as we can see in my reading this year. Up next, I read A Fortune for Your Disaster by Hanif Abdurraqib, and this was so good. It was really just about Hanif documenting a recent heartbreak, documenting finding joy in the most unexpected places, and the poems were stunning. Yeah, it's so hard for me to talk about poetry sometimes because it just feels so personal, but yeah. A really interesting memoir that I read and finished was Bone Black by Bell Hooks. This is a very short memoir and it's all about Bell Hooks' memories. What I found interesting about this is that each chapter is written in 3 pages, and they are truly just, the chapters together culminate in a collection of fleeting memories that while you're reading you're into, and as soon as you kind of begin to be in that place, you're moving on to the next. And what I found so intriguing formally about this, and what has kind of made me reshape my understanding of the memoir, is the fact that Bell Hooks decided to, instead of chronicling her life and how she reached a certain point, give you these memories that you enter into, and then you walk away with some form of who Bell Hooks was as a person and how she got there. Well, I'm kind of coining this as a part of the poet's memoir, where it gives you these little snippets, almost vignettes, and once again kind of leaves you, the reader, to make what you can of who Bell Hooks was and how these memories influenced her. Okay, another book that I just loved, and a writer who I'm beginning to love so much is Jamaica Kincaid's Lucy. This is about Lucy, who is 18 years old. She has just left Antigua, and she is serving as an au pair for a family, a wealthy, affluent family in a city. Oh my gosh, this dog is going crazy. In a city, and she is struggling with letting go of her identity at home, coming into herself, being away from home. And what I found so intriguing about this as well is how Jamaica Kincaid's kind of exploring the importance of nomenclature, names, and how they either manifest in the life of the person with that name, almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy to some extent. But she ends up developing a relationship with the wife of this of the couple that she's the au pair for, and she sees their marriage kind of dissolving and the effects that it has on the wife and the children, and what she makes of this. It's kind of like a facade fading away, and a life that Lucy thought maybe was attainable to her seems out of reach, and what she does or how she copes with this idea of like always trying to reach a goalpost for a life that is ever changing. A book that was so fun and experimented with language was Homie by Danez Smith. I absolutely adored this poetry collection. I have heard nothing but fantastic things about Danez Smith's writing, and they truly did not disappoint with the poems. This inspired me so much, because if you know, you know, I'm not going to ruin it for you. From the first page, you can just tell how Danez is going to play with language, play with connotations of words, try to reclaim words with negative connotations to them, especially as it relates to being a Black queer poet. Some of my favorite poems were I'm Going Back to Minnesota Where Sadness Makes Sense, stunning. The Flower Who Bloomed Through the Fence in Grandmama's Yard, Say It With Your Whole Black Mouth, Undetectable, Broken Rice, Waiting on You to Die So I Can Be Myself, My Poems, Trees, just so beautiful. Another thing that I will return to again and again. Up next, rapid fire. I read The Lost Cat by Mary Gaitskill. This is when I started being fascinated by literature that had to do with like humans and their relationships to animals, to pets. The Lost Cat is a memoir from a time where Mary Gaitskill loses a cat that was very feeble. She adopted it in Italy, took it back home to the States, and he is missing, and she goes through lengths to try to find where the cat has gone. She does not give up hope of the cat. Cat ended up becoming like a symbol and a metaphor for the lengths that one goes to kind of like repair or fix lost or broken things. This fell a little flat for me. I was kind of hoping that it spent more time with the relationship of the cat, but as I read through it, I kind of understood why it didn't and how it kind of related to the overall point of the piece. I also thought that this would make me cry, and it didn't, so I was a little disappointed by that too. After The Lost Cat, I read a few rules for predicting the future by Octavia E. Butler. This is an essay all about kind of how to stay vigilant in the face of like fascism, in the face of climate change, and how to be hopeful during those times. This is a really nice addition. However, it was fine. I don't know, I feel like I have probably seen summaries of this, and yeah, I mean, it's cool, but it wasn't anything super illuminating for me, if I'm being honest. But I know Octavia E. Butler's fiction is absolutely the place where she delves more into these ideologies. This was in response to someone who worked her words and said that she had no hope for the future, when in fact she does, and she just wants people to be prepared for it. Once again, very uncanny how she was able to look at the patterns and things happening in the 80s and 90s, and they're very accurate to what we're seeing today. Oh my goodness. Up next, I was so fortunate to have a copy of The Emperor of Glattness by Ocean Vuong. As you can see, I spent a lot of time with this one. This is about Hai, who is a young man coming to terms with the loss of someone that he loved very dearly, kind of like fumbling through life, trying to get his footing. This takes place in New England at the start of the opioid crisis, and it is about found family. Hai one time is deciding to unalive himself, and he hears a voice call out to him, and the voice that belongs to is an elderly woman named Granzina. They end up forming a relationship. Hai moves in with her and becomes her caretaker, and this has so many important themes, mainly what happens in a small town where people are content with just working their regular jobs, being regular humans, and kind of the antithesis to the success or like the rags to riches story, which Ocean has talked in lengths about. I've been to a talk about this book, and I listened to the interview, the infamous interview. And it's also about memory and history and the context in which Hai exists as a Vietnamese American person, how Granzina exists in the context of a war-ravaged Europe, and that's all I'll say. Something interesting about this too is that I have never craved a Salisbury steak before until I read this. And if you read it already, you know why. Alright, very quickly, I also read The Friend by Sigrid Nunez. This is my first Sigrid Nunez that I read, and this is about a woman who ends up becoming the caretaker for her mentor and friend's Great Dane when he passes away suddenly. I thought this too would be like an exploration of the relationship between a human and a pet. It is that, but so much more. There are so many kind of like sidebars and tangents about being a writer, being a female writer, this notion of what writing is like and what literature is like in the 20th century, and how it's being appended, like the traditions of it is being appended, and if that's a positive or a negative, and who it might be a positive or negative for, depending on like your gender, race. But I think I primarily loved it for its discussions about being a writer. Kind of wish I saw more of the Great Dane. This is also a film, and I'm looking forward to watching it. Perfect timing, because I think my camera's about to shut off. Very quickly, two poetry collections that I read. Water by Rumi and then Gold by Rumi. These are both translated by haleh, liza, gafori. I think I prefer Water a little more as someone who has a Cancer moon sign. I just felt that the moodiness and depth and kind of emotionally dark turn that this collection took was slightly better than this one for me, but they're both, I mean, it's Rumi, a legendary mystical poet. I loved Water so much that it made me go out and get this one. Who am I when love obliterates the I thought I was, drawing me from one path, leading me on another. Love that. I love poetry that centers the obliteration of the I, of the self. Make me forget who I am. That's what I want to feel like when I'm reading poetry. And very quickly, last but not least, this video is so long. I'm reading Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. I am a little under 50% of the way through with this. This was sparked by my obsession with sinners. I wanted to read more about religion and the role that that has played in Black Americans' lives, and this is satisfying that a lot. Can't wait to talk more about it. It's been so nice catching up with you. A lot of great news to share as well in terms of my poetry and what's coming next with that. It's so nice to see you. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Let me know what you've been reading. All right, love you. Bye.